Welcome to the Grateful American Radio Show, hosted by author and publisher David Bruce Smith. What did George Washington do that you might not know about? What did Abe Lincoln know that could change the way you think about the Civil War? You'll learn about all that and more on this special show designed to restore excitement in American history. Let's get started. Hi, this is Hope Katz-Gibbs with the Grateful American Radio Show. My co-host, author and publisher David Bruce Smith, and I are here today with Angela Sontheimer, Managing Director of the Lincoln Leadership Institute at Gettysburg. As a little twist to our show, Angela will be interviewing David about his book, 3 Miles from Providence, The Tale of Abraham Lincoln and the Soldier's Home. We'll dive into that Q&A in just a moment, but first a little bit about her Lincoln Leadership Institute at Gettysburg. This is where Civil War history becomes a metaphor and the battlefield a classroom. In fact, leaders from some of the nation's largest corporations and government organizations have taken the Institute's 3-day training program because it's ideal for team building and leadership training, and it attracts anyone who finds themselves having to perform or produce in a stressful and rapidly changing environment with limited resources and limited information. In fact, as Angela will tell you, that is just the situation that the soldiers and commanders found themselves in during the Battle of Gettysburg. Founded by Stephen B. Wiley, an entrepreneur, author, and highly acclaimed speaker, his organization leads others toward unprecedented success by developing their leadership skills at all levels. So now let me turn the microphone over to Angela to interview David Bruce Smith about 3 Miles from Providence.
Thanks, Hope. Jared and I are excited to be here today. David, what was your inspiration to write about the Soldier's Home?
Well, it really wasn't an inspiration. It was a lucky break. I went to Springfield, Illinois with my parents and Dick Moe, who was then president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the fall of '06. To see the Lincoln Library, and they were preparing for the re-inauguration of Lincoln Cottage in 2008, and I asked if they had anything to promote it, and they didn't. So I thought about it, and then I called my father the next morning, and I asked him if he thought, because he and my parents had been involved in Lincoln Cottage. He and my mother had been involved in Lincoln Cottage. I asked him if he thought they would be interested in a book. So he suggested I call them, and I did, and they were, and that's how it happened.
Great. So I'm interested, your book isn't written in traditional prose form. Why did you choose the style that you did and the beautiful non-traditional binding?
Okay, while I was at the Lincoln Library in Springfield, this is what they told me. More has been written about Lincoln than any person in the history of the world, other than Christ. So that meant 25,000 to 30,000 books had been written then. So I had to figure out, well, you can't change the facts, but you can change how you present the facts. So I tried to figure out how I could present the material in a slightly different way. So that's how I came up with the diary format and the 8 generations, and it goes from the 1840s to 2007, and the language changes as it evolved. And with each generation, the font changes. So that's how the reader knows that there's been a change in that.
And what about the presentation and the binding?
Oh, the presentation, well, I knew there were 2 ways to do this. Either I could do a standard book, a very rectangular book. I thought that would be boring, and I didn't want to give them that option. So I went online to see if soldiers carried anything. And most of the soldiers carried pouches that folded in, and then there was a leather string that wrapped around, and then there was the U.S. stamp on it. So that's what I used as my model for the design, and it's also a tactile experience. So before you actually open the book, you touch the leather and it has some effect, and the paper was sort of period paper, and the all the fonts were period, because I go all the way up to actually to email. So all that is meant to cue you visually and hopefully psychologically to enjoy it more.
Great. Can you tell us a little about the research that you did before setting pen to paper or finger to?
Okay. I had not much time. I had 6 months. So when I started looking up Lincoln on Amazon, you could scroll down forever. I mean, I didn't know what to do. So I called Lincoln Cottage and I asked them if they could just give me an idea of how to start this. So they gave me some recommendations. I got those books, and then I sort of went off on my own. And so I researched it for 4 months, and I had less than 2 months to write it, which it's probably the only thing I've ever done that I couldn't duplicate, because it was some kind of Zen state of mind, I suppose. I mean, I could never do it again.
Yeah, that's a very fast turnaround.
Yeah.
What's your favorite memory of the Soldier's Home?
2. One is when I was preparing, when I was trying to figure out how to do this. I was walking the grounds with Erin Carlson Mast. She's now the director. She was then doing the renovation, and she was taking me around. And there is something that happens every time I'm there, and I think for a lot of people, there is a very strong presence of Lincoln. And when you see what he saw, like the cemetery, he saw guys being put in the ground every week. And you imagine him watching that from the cottage, or quoting Shakespeare from to whoever his visitor is, or meeting people in the middle of the night in his pajamas. You know, he's very human,